Hi, Frode.
Hello. Sorry, what happened?
100 degrees, 30 minutes. What? I don't know.
Sorry, guys. Very important steaming of carrots.
Go ahead.
100 to steam. Are you doing it on steam?
Yeah.
Yeah, do it
100 to 30 minutes.
something like that. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. So we all have our priorities.
Carrot steaming is quite important.
We have people coming over for dinner afterwards. So
Nice. Are you in the Netherlands, Norway? Where are you?
I'm not Dutch. Let's say block Raphael. What button is that?
Ah.
No, Norway. Next to Adam.
Ah, next to Adam, Norway. I
And
see.
Raphael is in Botswana, or what was it? Boo, boo, boo.
There's no point giving him an insult because saying I'm Dutch is the worst insult there is. So we're kind of out of cities or countries rather. So absolutely no problem. I mean, no,
Well,
no point.
when you're in the jungle, anything Nordic seems like, or even like, those areas, those islands, those top right of the world.
Yeah, I know. It's tough in Bolivia, isn't it? It starts with a B. I'm in Bergen. Anyway, it's super rainy outside. So there you go. I don't know if I mentioned it. I think I mentioned to some of you. We have a family boat now. It's only a 6-seater, 70 horsepower. It's not very flashy or anything, but it's really, really, really amazing to be steaming around. You feel so fast when you're on the ocean, then you go a bit close to land, you look at land, it's like, this would be very slow driving, but it's still pretty cool. Oh, it's amazing. Right, so we need to get ready for tomorrow. So tomorrow is make it or break it for Visual Meta, which means is also make it and break it for my entire life, obviously. Yeah, no, you're just saying that it's just Swedish.
Of course not.
So I'm just going to go to our website here and click on the structure and then share screen. Because today we're not going to argue. Today I'm just going to listen to what you guys say. And we're going to nail this down. So first of all, a really important thing is these things Peter wanted, and I think I agree with him. Peter wanted to have these long tags so they all say Visual Meta. It is good for transparency, openness, and other people understand it, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, I have to fix my internet.
Yeah.
The self-citation, is that an established word, or is it we calling it self-citation?
We calling it.
Yeah, I haven't seen anyone. I'm not aware of a sort of known term for this. I mean, I think sort of certainly in English language terms, it is certainly self-descriptive, as correctly descriptive as to what it is. And I haven't seen that method being done before.
The reason I use that term, and I'm very eager to change it, is because when we go into the extensions, we have the references. So all of these are, of course, BibTeX to other things. So how do we then make it really clear that this is BibTeX about this document?
To me, that seems pretty self-explanatory as to what it is. And it seems to me that the self-citation is almost like the minimum viable bit of Visual Meta. Because if Visual Meta does no more than to actually give a clear, structured description of what that document should be cited as, that's still a win. Because this whole thing is an end around to the fact that we constantly are chopping citation data in and out of arbitrarily formatted strings, which is helping no one in the round.
Yeah, so Peter's joining us, which is great. I'm also hoping that Jacob can join us, but yeah, okay. So a lot of these things I think we're just going to agree on. Someone sent me a message. Okay, Raphael's getting water. That's cool. So should we call it self-citation or cite this document or?
I'd leave it as it is. I mean, I think, to be honest, because we could otherwise spend ages
no one has
just
a problem.
on this.
Yeah,
And I think actually it does what it says on the tin. I don't know if you saw, I sent something through, I think, to everyone on Saturday, was it? And I didn't get around to it till actually only this afternoon. I think I sent it Fred and Info, Peter and Jacob. I looked through that document. And I think what I learned from that whole process is that probably what we should push for at this stage is, whilst we have the overarching structure, is for ACM, for HT21, is to just get a clean self-citation and the other envelopes in there. I think when I look at the exercise of cleaning through imported BibTeX data, that until there are better methods for sort of cleaning that and marking that up, which we can continue to discuss, to do it at this stage would make it overly ambitious.
I'm not interested in cleaning it up, because I think that it is, of course, important to have.
Well, don't put it in then. Just don't put in.
No, but Mark, let me explain my position, because I'm not just trolling you for a fist fight or anything. The reason is, I'm going to see if Jacob says, okay. The reason I'm saying that is just, hopefully, let's say everything goes wonderful and Visual Meta takes over the world, that problem is solved if the self-citation is correct, right? And it's copy-paste. So if someone now puts in citations in their document and there is an error, that is their error that ACM has approved. I don't think we should meddle with that. That's
what I was trying to say is I would avoid that problem altogether. It's not necessary to do this at this point, and it doesn't stop you doing it in Author at this point, and it doesn't stop us doing stuff for later in the year for Sir Ryan's Doug's anniversary. I'm just thinking pragmatically so that you can constrain the problem, in selling this. I mean, I still think it would be a massive win if the only thing that you got in of the whole sort of VM thing was the structure.
I agree with that, but let's go through these things, because the meeting tomorrow will be about what they want, obviously.
Sure.
So a minimum Visual Meta is the intro text, the header, self-citation, and the end. That's it. So I think we all agree on that, right?
Yep.
So Adam just asked if that's a name we've made ourselves, and we spent a jolly time discussing the name, and we all agree with it. So Adam, you're just wondering, you don't have a problem with the name, right?
No, maybe it's a bit codey, but techy, but that is the only problem. But it is code in a way, and it's metadata, and it's mostly for machines. So I don't have any more problems more than that.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Wonderful. So at the end of this call, Mark, please remind us. We will go into this and look at the issues you found in the Jacob test documents. But there's a few other things to go through.
Sure.
And that is this one. Now that I'm not in an airplane or a car or anything, I think we should just decide on what to do here with the...
Isn't the Tesla self-driving? Looked like you didn't drive itself.
It was driving itself, except for, getting out doing COVID tests. I have complained to Elon Musk that my car does not do my COVID tests. Other than that, I think it's just fine. Right, so for fun, let me go in here again. We have, no, I'm being very silly. It is, of course, in this block. In this block, we have the article ID.
Yep.
So that's what we had a lot of discussions over. So my criteria, and I'm sure you all agree, is that it should be useful and not hard for publishers to add, right? So with that in mind, we have the VM ID being the date and the author name. Can't we just also put that in here? Isn't it close enough to being, the same person or somebody with the same name publishing at exactly the same second is going to be unlikely, right? Or do we have to do a hash? The hash thing that Peter's introduced in the last emails is very worthwhile, but I'm wondering if we should put that in its own bit.
Well, in the round robin I sent, my thought is that essentially we could keep those two parts of the ID in a sense separate. I mean, they can either be written as syntax as one together, but there's sometimes the unchanging part, which is like the the meta ID for the whole ecosystem of documents and all the versions that flow from it. The hash tells you emphatically which one it is. The bit you've just there where it says @article, and you've got an unclosed, an unopened parenthesis there, which will if someone tried to use that, I'd remove that bracket at the end. Someone will copy it and then something will break. Right. Is that the ID is purely something that anyone who takes this example, no, you've now closed the whole article. There's no, that's it. That's correct, like that. And you don't want another comma in there either, because the comma has to go at the end. Take out the comma.
The comma has to go.
It's just how it is. No, look, it's how it works. Stop arguing. You don't mind.
Mark, this is for our discussion. I'm about to delete this.
Yeah, okay. Well, the ID there has no purpose other than something passing the BibTeX will expect there to be an ID, and it is not a global identifier. It literally has to be unique within the current context of use. In other words,
Oh no, I understand that, and that's why I'm so grateful for your perspective on this. But the question I wanted to ask the other day is, can it not also be global?
Not unless you're going to change the whole of BibTeX, and I wouldn't take that on, because as we've already said, BibTeX is only a stalking horse to the point where something better comes along. Because
if we do make it a unique number of whatever way it's generated, if it is that, even though someone changes within the reference manager, whatever, so you're saying that it will get just shredded?
Yeah,
it's guaranteed to be shredded.
Yeah, Frode, the thing is that you can't have some characters that we currently use in the other identifier, the visual meta identifier, will destroy this part of the BibTeX entry. So it needs to basically be a number and alphanumeric characters to be really safe. But some character.
Okay, that's fine. So what should we? What is the simplest, easiest thing that tomorrow I can say to ACM and Sheridan? The way we do the article, the ID is.
Well, as long as the ID that you're using further down, the one thing you want to avoid is ampersand, underscore, and percent signs will need to be escaped. I.e., you'd have to put a backslash in front of them. So I think that's fine. The fact that it happens to be the ID as well as the tag here is neither here nor there, and you will need to come
exactly. Exactly, I now understand that. So these
comma at the end.
Yeah.
A little break.
These hyphens and slashes, should they go?
No, they're fine. They should be all right.
Okay, you're okay with that as well, Peter and Adam? We can go them. We can go them.
I mean,
no, they should. The first ones should be there, because that is. Okay.
Because it does.
Without them. We could just use an auto-generated nano ID. There are a bunch of things that are cleaner. I have trouble with going with. See, you're going to wind up having to use software to generate that anyhow in most cases. The article ID there and the @article symbol, that's going to be what somebody chooses to make it easy for them to use their LaTeX typesetting system. Every different BibTeX program has a different approach there. And usually what will happen is when you import a bibliography from an external source, your bibliography citation manager is going to assign those IDs for the individual articles based upon whatever scheme it wants. Some might be author year, some might be DOI numbers if it can find them, some might be just completely random garbage and rubbish, some might just completely ignore that field entirely until you get around.
I do now understand that. But what is the easiest thing we can tell them to do? Date and time, or author and title, or some combination? It should. What do they usually do for ACM? Actually, maybe that's.
They use their DOI, which we wouldn't know at this point.
Okay, so wouldn't they be able to give that to us for the production of this? They would, right?
Well, yeah. The point is, the fact that you've just written ACM ID in there, in a sense, has already given this a notional key. A parser will be happy with that. And one of the discussions is to say to ACM, and you can call that what you like. The more important thing, to be perfectly honest, is that the ID that we're trying to make a more persistent thing is in the
Lower down bit.
data set there. Yeah, so which you've got there.
Okay.
I do recall we had this conversation as to whether this should be stored outside the.
Yeah, I can show you some example metadata I was playing with. Let me share my screen on that. Give me a second.
No, but hang on.
Yeah.
For this bit, because we burnt a lot of time on it, if we just leave it saying ACM ID, and they tell us that they will be able to paste their ID in, great. If not, if we have to tell them something else, then we can make a suggestion, this, that, or whatever, because what you're saying here is truly, really, honestly doesn't matter.
Why don't you just call it local ID? It's going to be changed and mutilated anyhow. Just call it local ID. It can be anything. It really doesn't matter. And also, what happens when we decide we want to sell this to the IEEE down the road?
Then they make it. Then they make it.
AAI, they're going to say ACM, and they're not going to want to touch it politically.
Okay, I'm going to call it tomorrow. I will leave it ACM. So I'll just say ID provide ID number, ID code.
Call it local ID. That's safe. And
Really, yeah, I'd agree.
agnostic as to organization.
All right. Okay. All right. Just because you're right, I'll do it. Because from author, I guess it should just say augmented author or whatever the heck I want, right?
Yeah.
From
I mean, it could be as simple. It could be as simple as Article 1, Article 2, Article 3 with a simple counter and what kind of.
It's only going to be, but it's only going to be one because this is about the document we're exporting. Right?
I mean, it's a horrid method because it's insanely hard to guess what that key really means. So what everyone happens when they first use these systems is they're told the key's wrong or something, but it doesn't explain that it doesn't really matter what it is.
Okay, well, that's fine. This one is now locked. This is now locked in stone. Not another second should be spent on its edification. Right. So author, and that's going to be in the format that they use. All of this actually will be copied and pasted from their BibTeX for this document. The only thing we're actually adding is the VM ID.
Or, you know what we could do? We could call it volatile local ID or transitory local ID to make it clearer that that thing is going to change and get mutated. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, but remember, guys, for ACM, this entire thing will just be given to us.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Except for this.
Yep.
So in order to make it, I'm a bit worried politically that we're imposing a organization system upon the world, but doing it in this way, using this kind of logic is quite politically neutral, isn't it?
Yeah, and anything more than this, and you're going to end up we're going to end up rammed into yet another sort of standards meeting with all sorts of people with different views. And I don't think there's anything exceptional about this. It's just, it's a reasonable attempt. You can pick all sorts of holes in it, and the truth is something better will follow. But I think this gets us to the point where if it gets us through, a year or two and a few iterations, and there's enough of stuff out there, because one of the things is until we get a number of these done, we can't give it the sort of proper kicking it needs to see what it actually looks like when it turns up in the end document. So for my 2 penneth worth, I'd say that's fine.
Oops. So, okay, this is very good. So and here below is the VM ID description.
Sophia doesn't have an S on the end of her name for what it's worth in the ID. She's Kitramilli.
Yes, but Sophia.
Oh, I see you're doing it that way. Okay.
It's by character.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, understood. Sorry, my apologies.
No. Don't apologize for catching things other than a cold or COVID. In which case, apologize immediately, right? So, so this is start with the date and time in UTC. The document was created. This is a bit badly written, isn't it? Then the first 10 characters of the author's name, first, middle, la la la. No, using random characters if name is shorter. That's all what we've agreed before, isn't it?
Not a semicolon. You changed it to a slash between the date and the author.
You did.
So replace the semicolon
with a slash.
Three lines above the cursor.
Slash.
Slash.
Yeah. Thank you. That's. Hang on. I'm getting a lot of texts. Oh, it's not Jacob. He's just coming. Right. Okay. Thank you. That's the kind of spotting that makes me not look like a complete fool tomorrow.
Do we need to put the padding in the end? Because if the padding, if it's we know the fixed number of digits up to the end of the name. If the name doesn't fill that whole thing, do we need to really put padding in? Because if you're parsing it, you're going to start at the beginning.
Adam, what do you think, Mr. Coder?
No, it can with this. Yeah, it can be shorter. So just remove the padding.
Oh, can I make a suggestion? Instead of saying the time the document was created, how about the time the metadata was created? Otherwise, someone's going to have to go reaching into the file system, try to figure out when the document was created. And all. It's when the metadata is generated. Use that time instead. And then that's completely unambiguous. Whatever the program is, it's generating that block of metadata. That's the time you should use instead of worrying, because otherwise there's going to be a debate over when is it, what form of the document. The word document just opens up a Pandora's box.
You're absolutely right. How about that?
Yes, that's much cleaner.
Yep.
Fantastic. So then we have also or. Oops. I can't even select two characters. There we go. If the visual meta by reader software, that's when we do the hash thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you remove this for now to make it easy for them. If you're sending this link, you could just remove the more complicated scheme that is for your software and other software for now.
I think that's a good idea. However, I will be talking them through stuff. And okay. I think that this could be then used for all their old stuff, for their own documents too, maybe. But yeah, I have to make an effort to make sure they don't think it's a have to have.
Yeah. And something you can explain verbally. Sorry, Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, because there's more than one kind of identification scheme we might want to be using in parallel, and each for its own purpose. I'd like to see us have a Raskin Humane ID, and that could be your 3 or 4 word phrase that I can remember when I'm at a conference, and I can tell someone, look up blue penguin eats sausages. And they can type blue penguin eats sausages because they're going to remember that phrase into the system, and that can result in a document directory service dereference that will return the document.
I'm not. Yeah, I think that there's something very poetic about that. Like what 3 words, but for documents.
Raskin's approach was he'd have the system generate a series and let the user at the time that he's adding the metadata pick whichever one was most memorable to him, so that you could avoid having something that's a little bit too ungainly. Or if, heaven forbid, there's some culturally offensive combination that got generated, you could skip that. So the system would present you with a dialogue of 3 or 4 silly spy handshake passphrases. You'd pick the one that you thought was cool and you liked, and that would be used. At that point, it would get registered. Although the odds of you're getting a duplicate are very low, you still would want to register it with a distributed name server system so that you could make sure that the combination you picked independently wasn't already in use.
I think that's definitely
that's relatively straightforward infrastructure.
Like a lot of your contributions here, Peter, very, very cool, but very, very for the future.
Then you'd also like to have
no
ID to put document in the context of the chain of other related documents in different versions.
Yes,
so a Nelson ID would be very valuable too.
You're killing me. I'm trying to simplify for tomorrow, not open up entire worlds of discussion.
Well, can't you just tell them that they're going to be, maybe just like have a block for other identifiers to let them know that in the future there are going to be other kinds of identifiers that are going to be added. They could all maybe live in their own.
I'll tell you what, because
identifier block.
Adam was trying to censor me, and now I'm trying to censor you. So how about if you bring this up on Friday after the meeting tomorrow, then we do that. We'll maybe even do a little asterisk on that page and make a whole different page for it, because identifiers are absolutely super important. I'm just really quite scared about tomorrow.
Let me add my 2 cents really quickly. Something I like to do is I always like to break things into 3s. So in this context, you can talk about present, past, present, and future. And then past, the status quo, and then present, what can be implemented, and in the future, where we can get to. And then another way we can divide it into three is simple, medium, and complex. So what's the easiest thing to do? And then what's a good way to do? And then what's the optimal way to do? So whenever we break things into threes, it makes it easy for people to follow and to understand the structure of how things are organized. So whenever you're, trying to figure out how to explain things, try to put it into threes.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of looking at it, especially with the past, current, and future. We have core, extended, and custom. So we started looking at it that way. But right now it is immediately for tomorrow morning. So on Friday, I think we can do more elaborations of that, even though we have other things.
Yeah, I'm afraid there's nothing to stop you dropping in verbally. Just say, we're aware that there are other things in. In other words, you don't necessarily have to build it on screen, I think.
No, because I had a close old friend, one of my very oldest friends, came to see us today, and I showed the whole visual meta thing, and he gets about half of it, and he's a clever guy, just because it's a new thing, for no other reason, right? So let's just focus on what we can expect to do with them tomorrow, right? Because we have this thing is a bit crazy. The entire document, and so that's just purely experimental. Maybe I should even remove that from here. But this is the thing that we have designed together, the author detail. I think that's pretty important. So if they have a workflow that can support this, if they already know these things, fantastic. Otherwise, it's just they will say no and we'll skip the page, right? There's also the document headings, which I hope that Jacob can join us. So what we've done now is we're doing it more BibTeX style, not actual BibTeX, obviously, rather than JSON. So it starts saying it's a heading, the name, level, and on what page it is on. And that's logical page for that document. So in these academic articles, there's only going to be a few pages anyway. Here we can also put author like we currently have. It fits the style, right? So a question for you guys is, it's okay to put these things on the same level, or do we have to put them with a page break? I'm talking about saving page space.
They could all be on a single line, frankly. There's no reason why we need to move name onto another line and put the closing brace on another line. The data is short enough, just one line entries are more than good enough. And again, parsing's trivial because remember, the parser just ignore the white space.
So we could actually do this.
Yep.
I mean, you can show it two ways round, because if you've got the non-believers there, you can say, look, we could do this, but in reality, the format allows us to just compress this down. Because the people who in the room who don't have the facility with code may not necessarily guess that.
Okay, that's really
cool. They won't imagine it.
And I am on the call.
Oh, you are? Oh, you really?
I have been for a while.
I didn't say anything bad about you, did I?
Not that I can repeat.
Right. Okay. Let's go back to the beginning. Stop me if I'm repeating things you've already seen. So the header bit, I think we're all fine with. There's nothing new there, other than we may have a name or a link to a plain text version. That's for them to decide. Maybe we should delete that. That's fine. But the big one is, of course, the because I noticed, Jacob, you don't have all of this text. I think it was Peter who first said it was really nice for people if it says Visual Meta for all of this to make it crystal clear it is part of Visual Meta. So you're cool with adding these long verbose tags, right, for the sections?
Yeah, what I have was up to date at the time that I added it. This has changed, but I just don't have newer changes out yet.
Yeah, so today we are locking down our presentation, but tomorrow they may modify it, and after that it is locked down for production, right? Okay, so here inside the document BibTeX, we need to have a way to say at article. That's probably something we'll just, I think I was working in Photoshop on this. You're seeing all my secrets there. Yeah, we'll probably just have, for citing, this document is at article or whatever, but that's an author thing. That's not really pertinent for tomorrow. And then on the, were you here for the discussion of this ID bits, Jacob?
Yeah.
Okay, so we will just, yeah, from author, what kind of ID should we give it there? Just literally say, yeah, what should we do?
Now, I just pasted into the chat the notation that I recommend between the introduction and before the visual meta start tag. And that would be where we could put the content hashes of the visual meta and of any errata that are attached at the end of the visual meta. And the format of that is an IPFS content ID, which can be generated entirely locally without putting anything out there. And that way you can see quite clearly the visual meta IPFSD would be everything wrapped in the visual meta start to visual meta end being hashed to get a content identifier representing that exact version of the visual meta. And that's the hook that you really need for the errata system to work. Otherwise, you don't know which version of what you're talking about when you're trying to apply errata.
Okay, I just realized I need to change something here while we try to
You don't want to have the hash values inside of what's being hashed, so they really have to live separate, and that's the cleanest way to do it. I put in there 2 because errata is optional, and because it's also at the same level as visual meta, you could have those 2 things get independently hashed and it'd be much cleaner. And then there's no ambiguity of, am I hashing just what's in between the visual meta start and end, or am I hashing what's in between the visual meta start and end plus what's in between the visual meta errata start and end? So this way people can't mess it up because they see, clearly there are 2 hashes, one's optional. If there is no errata, that hash value is just empty braces. Otherwise, you put a hash value in there if there are errata, and then we can identify the errata
so
by their exact content and the block of visual meta we're talking about by the exact content.
So first of all, you're talking about in here, right? Visual meta header start in that section.
No, I'm talking about
Self-citation.
Introductory text and before visual meta start itself. It has to be outside of the visual meta because these are hash values related to everything inside of the visual meta. And we want to make sure that we don't have a self-mutating hash value that's never going to be stable. Otherwise, people would have to do hairy programming to find the hash value inside of the visual meta, replace it with placeholder text, rehash, then put the value back in after they generated the hash. It'd just be a nightmare from a programming simplicity point of view. Just keep it in a separate block and it's infinitely cleaner. Then you just see, everything in at visual meta, we hash, and that's where we drop the hash outside of the visual meta. Everything in the errata we hash and drop the hash value outside of it. And those are our hooks that we need for the errata system.
Okay.
And is this really necessary for tomorrow or for this first run, Peter? Is it absolutely crucial to get it from the start?
Absolutely crucial, because otherwise you can't build the errata system without a way to identify the exact thing that you're applying the errata to. So I'd say it's critical, but it can be listed as those values can be left blank initially, but they're at least at minimum, the placeholder for that has to be there. Ideally, they'll generate the IPFS hash of the visual meta block once the visual meta block has been generated, but they could leave it out because anyone looking at that visual meta block could generate the hash later on.
Okay,
So it doesn't have to be in there at production time.
I have questions, Peter.
Where it goes has to be in.
I have questions. First of all, so this bit here is literally what you wanted to say at production because it says what it is, right?
Right.
So this thing,
that hash value itself is going to depend on the hash, or it could be left empty. You could actually delete the value at the moment. That just so they know that's where it's going to go.
Okay, so we can do that from this one as well, right?
Yeah.
So my question about this thing is this hashing what the visual meta is, or is it an address for this visual meta? What is this?
That's a hash of the exact content of the visual meta that's following that hash ID.
So what's
So it's
what's the
version
difference
specific.
Okay.
That's version specific, so that you make sure that the errata are connected to the thing where the error is. Otherwise, you can have a scenario where the error has been corrected. Then somebody sees an errata and they go back in looking to correct the errata, and they're not really looking at the same thing the errata was talking about, and they get
Okay.
horribly
Right. No, that's interesting. So Peter, this value here, how is it derived again? Is it IPFS?
That's derived by doing an IPFS hash of the text, starting at visual meta start, starting and including at visual meta start, all the way to at visual meta end and including at visual meta end inclusive. So it's the entire visual meta block that's being hashed.
And
Same thing on
Peter,
the errata
to
block
under-
with presence being hashed.
Peter, to understand you, even from a technical point here, the reason you're avoiding a document hash, the regular system that most systems use, a full document secure hash, is that because people will annotate the PDF document and make
Yes,
versions
people are going to
different?
annotate the PDF document, they're going to mess with it, and they're going to wind up breaking it.
Okay,
This way
so
we're
that's
talking about-
why.
We're talking
Yeah,
about the visual meta.
It just
Now,
occurs to me.
inside of the visual meta, we can have content hashes of the original document and related documents. And let me show you an example of how that might look. Adding to the at visual meta tag, let me show you some examples. This is what, okay, hang on, I'll be pasting into the chat in a second. And this will just give you an idea of what it might look like in a final fleshed out system down the road.
But
you can
if
have-
we hardly get it here, will ACM get it, Peter? I really see where you're coming from here, but yeah, this is complicated. Look at Frode. He's looking down, very depressed now, looking at his keyboard. Even moved to Bergen just because he heard too much talk about identifiers.
Adam, that's nonsense.
He bought a boat. He bought a boat just to get some life in him.
Adam, you know that's nonsense. You know that's just to get closer to you. I'm going to not continue this discussion to strike a balance. I'm going to leave it in as this and see what kind of reception it gets, and say that, you know, this is a really higher level thing, and, you know, optional for now. But because of the Peter, what I think you are doing here is adding a layer of computer chain solidity, which I think can be really, really, really important.
And addressability too. We have to be able to distinguish between the document and the abstract that might have different instantiations of it, and the specific document that we're looking at. The Tumblr ID lets you get at how versions relate to each other, so that you can grab all subversions related to a version. You can step back up the chain to get other documents done by the person. So the Tumblr ID from the Xanadu system is incredibly valuable, and we want to get that in there at some point in the future, but just letting them know that it's coming. Here are the kinds of things that would be added.
Yes. Peter, you've sold it already. You've sold it. I think it is, if they have a liking for it, fantastic. I do think it could really add value, but I think we're drilling into really deep to a specific area that I don't think we can afford. But I do have a question for Jacob. First of all, Jacob, did you understand all that? I'm not sure if I did. And secondly, would it be reasonable for you to put into author doing this stuff to add this above of our visual meta below?
Just a plain hash of the raw text itself wouldn't be a problem. My only concern is if I were to then try to hash it later out of the PDF, to verify it, it could very easily be different, especially if the lines have wrapped.
That's
And
actually
there
a
are
crucial
all
and
kinds of
weird point.
Phantom new lines added in.
So what you would have to do then, Jacob, is to export the visual meta as a PDF, hash that
Yeah.
PDF, re-import it, take that value and put it in.
Well, even that could be dicey, because if it's more than one page and I don't have the exact
Well, I think the way that,
start.
well, the way that I generate that hash of the visual meta is flush out all white space, remove all optional commas, and basically it's the parsed version of the visual meta text that you'd be hashing. So again, squeeze everything out
Yeah,
except your field names and values and hash on that.
yeah, that would make sense.
Because
We
again,
would need to know
the people are going to
exactly-
mangle commas. You know that their software, if it goes through any kind of processing software, commas are going to get added. They're going to get removed. Somebody's going to slap an unnecessary comma on the final element in the list. Somebody else is going to see that, be repulsed,
Okay.
and take it out.
All right. Okay. Having this discussion means I think this has to wait till Friday.
The small one, Fred. Just that. Well, if this bit doesn't go in, it's moot. But as it's going to sit outside the app visual meta start and end, I just wonder if you want something that's more of just a visual marker. So in other words, it's not part of the metadata, but it's just for, it's in a sense more of a marker for I'm just looking at the page or something. In a sense, it's probably more for the start, because as it sits at the end of the document, it's just that, you know, when you see this, you know, you're in a different part, and it may also be a point at which you might drop an anchor in for PDF tools that are capable of realizing that we don't want to print this as a default print section.
I think that considering that if this goes well, next year we'll be doing this for the ACM web conference.
Yeah,
We leave this out for now.
fine. Yeah, I'm happy.
Because Peter, you have very, very, very good ideas, but I have to consider the cost of scaring people at the moment. That's fair enough, right?
Well, how about just have the version specific identifiers and don't even put the values in, just leave it as like an empty section to know
Peter,
that identifiers will be added.
it's already quite complicated. It really is.
Yeah, but there's a certain minimal level of complexity that you need before it gets locked of them saying, oh, that wasn't there before, now we can't add it later on. When you are asking to add it, suddenly it becomes a big ask. Whereas if you just tell them, look, just leave this blank empty wrapper here. That
No, but Peter,
part of
we've
the overall structure.
solved that already by having these wrappers. You can, within Visual Meta Start and Visual Meta End, you can
Yeah, but you
always
need
add a
the
wrapper.
external wrapper for the content hashes of the visual meta and the errata.
Yeah, but
Without
this
that
is
wrapper in there,
Peter, it's just a pilot, right? The level of discussion that you, Adam, and Jacob have had, and Mark, says to me that if this is in a meeting where people are kind of technical, some are not technical, it will really sink the whole entire thing, right?
they're the bloody ACM. They should be somewhat technical.
Yeah, but
I mean,
they're
really,
not.
it's
Yeah,
not like we're trying to sell it to the Association of Psychologists here.
Yeah,
We're trying to
but
sell it to the ACM. They should understand the idea of just leave the empty wrapper at the top. Don't even say what kind of a hash it is. Just say this is where there's going to be a content hash of the visual meta itself to be used as a hook to establish the errata system. Without some sort of a global hash value of the content, I mean, it could be, you can argue about what kind of hash. Maybe they don't like IPFS. Maybe they want to just generate some internal ID that they generate, but there has to be some kind of an ID to represent this version of the visual meta.
all right, okay, how about this? Content hash for Visual Meta.
Okay, as long as there's a wrapper and they know that there's going to be something there, it doesn't necessarily even have to be there yet, but there has to be the place. Otherwise, they're going to come back and say, now you're changing our overall top level structure and we can't
That
do
is
that.
true. Yeah. I mean, I can see it both ways around. I mean, damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you don't put it in, someone will say, "Oh, you're changing it later." If you do put it in, that's all. It looks very complicated. But the thing is, I think what one can fairly say is that as night follows day, if this is taken up, there will need to be some more rigor in terms of errata and things. We've thought about this. We have an intended structure. It may be too complicated to instantiate for Hypertext 21. But you know, we're leaving these. We're suggesting these wrappers, and if they say we don't want them, well, they can come out. and they'll duly have to go in later. But if nothing else, one has a degree of moral victory, I think. When one can return to that point later, if it becomes a bit of push and shove, next time round.
All right. Okay.
That gives us our breathing room. Otherwise, I mean, I know how people think, and they're going to say, we didn't design the system to have a hook there. Now we can't add it.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
The only change I'd make there to that exact language just put is hashes, because there's more than one hash that possibly go in there. And if you say hash, they might think it's only a singular. So just say content hashes. Just make, and then where it says content hashes for Visual Meta start in the tag name. And then we're perfect, and I'm happy because I know my hook's there. We'll be able to fix it later on and add to it. And we're not going to get frozen out because we didn't make it part of the course structure.
Right.
Okay, good. I'm happy.
Okay.
I'm in my happy place.
Good. So I'm just wondering, I'm looking at my calendar. That's on my phone, so I don't, do the whole screen share. So tomorrow, this thing is 2 hours earlier than this meeting today, which is 4 o'clock Norway time. Jacob, are you able to be a part of that meeting, at least to be easily text messageable?
Probably messageable, not.
Can you please put in your
Not a
calendar to
call.
be messageable for that 1 hour slot, in case I have to furiously text you?
From, did you say 2 hours, starting 2 hours earlier?
Yeah, so this one started at 5 o'clock Norway time. That one starts at 3 o'clock Norway time.
Okay.
Fantastic. Who else can be available to answer question on short notice? Mark,
That's
thank you.
1400 UK. Yeah, I can tie a knot to be around.
Okay.
I'll only be fighting the pigeons.
Peter, will you be available if I need you?
Yeah, I should be able to be. So it's
Okay.
2 hours before 10, like 9 a.m. Eastern time. Yeah, I can deal with that. No problem.
What about you, Adam?
I think I'm busy then. Could be problems with the kids, but I think you have a good team. You can't have 5 people on call here.
No, but I'm not sure who I'm even going to bring into the call to begin with. Jacob, I'll not bring in because he's busy. But at least I now know I can text him if there is anything. And that's good because he represents the coding side of things. So you don't need to worry, Adam. And yeah, I'll probably just bring in Mark because he's also Southampton. So we look more like the same team, so to speak. Okay, so we have a few more minutes and I have a few more questions for you guys. For the extensions thing, as we've already said, the author details, if they have it, we go through this and see if they like the way it's done. If not, we change it. Pretty obvious.
Yep.
The references, we're going to do.
It says bib text.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for making me look like slightly less of an idiot. Yeah, so here, all we're going to do, and someone.
Also, we might have another transatlantic spelling issue. In the US, we use extension with an S, and you had an extension with a T there, so there could be some confusion.
It's on the previous page.
Because I have edit pages, I need to go the long way.
Okay.
Oops, sorry, structure. So what do you mean?
Extension. You had extension with a T on another page. I'm not sure where it was, but
Might be the next.
that's it.
Yes, in the tag at the top.
That's it. Yes.
Second T. Yeah.
And bib
Oh.
text.
Yeah, 'cause that
Again,
broke my parser. I tripped over that when I was parsing.
here, down, and bib text.
Thank
again.
you.
Yep.
Damn you, spell check / thank you for being my excuse.
Okay, that's it. Now they're consistent.
Thank you. Yeah, way to ruin a reputation, huh?
Well, we want you to look good.
Thank you. So under extension then, we have headings. And I think you were here for this, Jacob, right? We'll do it all on one line.
Yeah.
You're okay with that as well, right?
So yeah, and I mean, you can take out, you don't even need the space either side of the equals. You will need to respect the white space within the value. So if you had, if the name of the heading was introduction space 1 or something, then obviously that space would be kept. But otherwise, if you want to squeeze it down.
I think you can safely trim any space immediately adjacent to the inside of the braces. So if you had space introduction, you'd squeeze out that space and you'd squeeze out any trailing spaces. So assume that it'll be trimmed, but any white space in between the actual substantive characters would be preserved.
Yeah.
I think that it's okay. It looks consistent with the rest. If they want to truncate, we can do it.
And you can explain that easily on the fly anyway. If someone's going to, it wants to argue that, it should be self-evident, but that's the kind of thing the parser should be able to
Oh,
keep.
and I just pasted in the name of the LaTeX package that people use to store glossary entries in a BibTeX format. So you can take a look and just like Google for that package, and you can see, and maybe even paste in some sample glossary entries that are in that format. So that would show what the glossary part would look like. And that's totally consistent with BibTeX, because that is the notation system that's actually used in production.
For glossary.
Yeah, for the glossary.
Okay. Hang on. Did you send me a link to that?
I sent you the name of the package. Bib2Gloss is the name of the package.
Okay.
BIB2GLS.
So you expect the internet to just find this? So we were on the boat earlier today. This amazing.
There it is. See?
Yeah.
Back to Bib2Gloss.
Right. So we were on the boat, and guess what? The boat needed to do in the middle of the ocean.
Reboot.
OS update. Yes. Anyway,
That's
is there an example here I can just copy and paste?
Hang on. I'll paste in an example off of my sample. 1 second. I'll have it for you.
So I'm going to do new post.
Okay, I'll have that in the chat in a second. Copying it in now. Once I find the right window. Here we are, chat. Okay, there's an example of a couple glossary entries and index entries. That's the format.
neat. I also just dropped in the
What are the
sidebar a reference to just one of the longer things I found on BibTeX that seems actually sort of quite useful. Although it refers to some of the older forms and things, it's still, when one's trying to look up things, I found that quite useful.
Okay.
Thanks,
you.
Mark.
Hang on a second. What is this? I need help.
Okay, those are BibTeX style and compatible representations of glossary entries. So the idea there is that the sorting and formatting mechanism of BibTeX is being used by Bib2Gloss in order to sort and organize the glossary entries. And
I understand that, and that's fantastic. But what are these things? What is @ symbol and then M, comma?
Okay, @ symbol says that M is a math symbol representing a matrix. V is a mathematical symbol representing a vector.
Can we please do this to make an actual sample glossary? Can we do a glossary word for the word concept? So you tell me where the definition and where the term should be, please.
Okay, let me see if I can find an example of a regular word in the documentation. Hang on, I'm back into the documentation and I'm searching for examples.
Oh, by the way, Jacob, did you see the video of citing from copied picture text into author?
No, I haven't.
It's really cool. I'll show you in a second. Actually, while you're just looking that up, I'll show.
So here's an example of an acronym abbreviation entry.
Okay.
So that'd be a good thing to have in there. And
do that first. Okay. We can't say, isn't there a way to just say this is the term and this is the description?
Hang on, I'm looking. See, they address a whole bunch of nuance in there. It's really well thought out. And
It-
everything is, in a standard glossary entry. Let's see.
Yes, the glossary stuff is actually fierce. Somebody really has thought about it, actually. It's sort of rather complicated. I mean, the hardest thing to write is a really simple glossary entry.
I just have to show this to Jacob because he's the one who made it happen. So using the new macOS copy from a picture as text, if we do a book search, the chances are it'll actually find the book and make a real citation just from the Photos app. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's lucky that it.
Is that Big Sur and M1 or?
I'm not sure if and M1, I think it's just Big Sur, but sorry, also, what were you saying, Jacob?
So it's surprising there weren't any errors in the OCR, that it was actually able to find a good result.
There sometimes are, but most of the time I've tested it, it actually works. So it's just, I wanted to particularly show you because when you do the Google Books, it works there. And of course we're showing this. Right, okay. Back to the matter of hand. Have you got something?
I'm still looking for a simple one. These are very complex examples. Give me a minute.
Oh, I got an actual text message. Nothing relevant. Because also what we're going to do here in author is relevant to the future of all of this. Let me just try to find it. We're going to change the dialogue for citations to be this. So all of these are references that supports that definition.
Well, they even have hooks for multilingual entries.
So in this case, because our user group is students.
Yeah.
So when a student comes across something that supports defining something, they need to be able to find a way to do that. So the idea is you do Command D, type in whatever, where you found it, it'll already be added here. So you'll add all these things that support that thing, that concept. If you click the C button, it'll copy it as a citation.
Okay. Cool.
Nice to hear you say that. I thought you were going to make it much more robust and complex.
No. I mean, but
Just teasing you more.
the really, I mean, what this reinforces is that the need to have the citations right underneath. Otherwise, we're all building on sand. What if we're getting a cleaner system underneath? All these wonderful affordances actually become sensible.
Why don't we just build something here? So how do we include that?
Okay, here's a simple one. Okay, here's a simple entry for.
Adam, seems that you've got a thought bubble there on your screen.
Simple example. Okay, so you have a key, you have the name, you have a plural version of it, and a description of it.
Yeah, we're not going to have plural. Well, actually, Jacob, that's a question to you, because in author now, if I do cheese, comma, cheeses, it doesn't actually work in terms of being available in the concept map space. Do we need another way to say what other versions are?
I mean, we need to either have another way, or it needs to be a hard rule that if there's a comma, then there are alternative spellings, which could be an issue with city names, things like that.
Okay, so you're saying that ideally you would like to have this tokenized.
Yeah.
So come on, go away. So this is logic that's useful for all of us to have a quick look at. There's got to be a better way to go through. Whoa, okay. This is, you guys are on top of it. How annoying. That is not what we wanted. You are all it, and okay.
Might throw off the OCR.
Just a bit. Okay.
You mean it can't read text behind the front window? That's awful.
I know, this is just not... So this is what we're going to end up having, right? And then a little plus button if you want to add more. Or edit. What kind of interface would you like, Jacob? Oh yeah, no, exactly the same. We'll do exactly the same. So if you click here, it'll allow you to... Sorry.
We don't need a whole other separate editor like that. It would just work. It would just be a normal token field like in Mail, where if you want to delete one, you just select it and delete it, or you want to add one, you type more and hit enter.
So does that mean we have a box around it?
Yep.
How do you identify which of those terms is the singular and which is the plural, which is one of the elements of the glossary thing, or does it not matter?
It would probably have to be, the token field would have to be separate probably if we're wanting to truly say singular, plural, or what have you.
Sure.
That was a bit confusing.
We would, if we want to differentiate, if we
Oh, you
which
mean
I
if
think
you...
is what we want.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, sorry, to explain, I mean, one of the reasons it's done in the LaTeX system is simply that when you refer to the glossary item, if you define singulars and plurals, then you can in your text call the known calculated plural. So you know you're going to refer to the plural version of this item, and it will put the plural word in there. I think that's what I mean. So as much as it's the glossary, when you look at it explaining the singular and plural, it also allows them to be referenced in the right case. That might be gilding the lily at this point for you, for the author side of things. But anyway, that's I think the background of it.
So if we want to have a single term and then a plural for it, is it just a single and do we want to just have singular and plural, or do we also want to have
like Doug Engelbart, Carl
alternatives?
Douglas Engelbart, and stuff like that, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they're two different things, aren't you? I mean, one is sort of like an alias, you know, short name, long name, but they all point to the same thing. The other is a more literal thing that, you know, that cheese is the plural of cheese. So when you want to, and that probably doesn't matter so much in the author context because you aren't trying to do this back reference. One of the reasons I think it's built into the LaTeX thing is, as I say, you can pull that word via a macro code into the body text of the document. And one of the things the glossary is set up to provide the system with is the singular and plural. So if you had lots of glossary terms, the author doesn't have to remember exactly what they all are. I'm not sure you need that sophistication at this point. It's nice to have, but I don't think in terms of what you need to be doing in author at this point.
You see, we have these goodies given us to our overlord Apple.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, that will help us when we are doing things. But
I don't know if it actually, I know it will identify singular and plurals. I don't think it will recommend or generate for us.
Yeah, because I don't think you so there are two different. I think this is solving two different things, except that I suppose if you're trying to match from the text, if you type cheeses and you were expecting to get the glossary term for cheese, then you will need the map in the glossary end of things.
I'm not worried about plurals. I'm worried about different versions, like Doug Engelbart, Carl Doug Engelbart.
Yeah. Well, that's a sort of aliasing function, really, isn't it?
So will that be solved if we do this? And if so, Jacob, how do we tell the system, Christine L. Borgman, new thing, Borgman, I just happened to add an S just for fun, but how do we tell it to differentiate these? Because of course, in mail, the completion of an email address does it.
In other UIs I've used, if you press the return key, that normally flips it from being the editable version into the little pill like that.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's how this will work. I thought you were asking how. I thought you were asking something else.
Oh, sorry. So
Yeah, that's how it works.
So how are we going to list this here then? So we have, you know,
I guess just the first token would be the entry, and then is it alternate or alternates?
You actually need the actual name. Remember, the entry matrix isn't necessarily the name. That's the identifier for that entry. So you have to have a distinct name entry.
Yeah, the name.
This is just like where we have the mutating keys on the regular BibTeX entries. That's going to be some shortcut. And then you have the actual name that you want printed. And then you can have an alternate name you want, if you want to have an alternative.
So there should be a name in there as well, then, should there?
Right, there should be a name in there as well. The first thing is just like the label or key that's going to be used internally.
yeah, but
So-
that could,
You want the name,
so what do we call the actual term then?
the name,
New line name equals.
name equals.
No, I don't want that to,
Yeah,
ideally.
that's how it
That's how
works.
the glossary systems work.
Okay.
So that's the name. That's the
That's
master.
the name of the entry.
And I presume if there are multiple alternatives, you just have multiple alternative tags because the parser should pick that up. Is that right, Peter?
Yeah. But you can look at the bib2gloss documentation. It's monstrous because they covered every imaginable permutation.
So,
But the second one is alternative.
It has to be alternative. It can't
second
be the
name.
same key. It has to be the same key, right? Alternative.
so this cannot be name, it must be alt name,
You can't have two fields that have the same name. The field names have to be unique.
alt name 1.
Yeah, that could work.
So that stuff on top is good, right?
Yeah, that should be good format wise. At least it's enough for them to understand. It might change down the road, but at least to give them a sense, okay, the entries are going to look.
No, but this is really important for Jacob because he is implementing this.
Yeah.
Okay, so then finally, because of the new version of this where oh, sorry, it wasn't there, obviously, it was in here. Where we have all these sources below. What's the most efficient way of referring to them here?
Oh, and also, do we want to have a category associated with the entries?
We can have that. It won't be used in the beginning.
Fred, I would imagine if you want to put out your associated references, given that they are part of the references that you would be exporting in the references section, then you just take the ID, the ID that goes after, you know, the @article open brace, the next bit, that little that transitory ID.
I'm not sure if they would necessarily, would they be in the references? Jacob, what do you think? Because that's very elegant what you're saying, Mark, but I'm not sure because there can be something referred to in the glossary entry that's not referred. It'll still be referred. Okay, fine, you win. You're absolutely right. So site should be please remind me, what are we calling it?
It's effectively what we're calling, I think, the transitory ID or something. It's what you've put as the name. If you look at the self-site.
No, not self-site.
No, what I'm saying is when you look at the example on the self-site page, the bit that comes at the end of the first line,
Label.
whatever you call it there, the label, the transitory ID, that's what you're going to put in there for the reference, for the referenced item. That does mean, of course, that at the point of export, those IDs would have had to have been generated internally in the app so that the actual label string is addressable and insertable here.
Does that make sense to you, Jacob?
Yeah, so for a lot of them, it would probably just be the DOI unless if there wasn't anything included in the original bid text. And then for manually added citations, I guess it would just have to be whatever we come up with for the self.
Yeah, because it's this weird thing that as long as basically you haven't got two of these IDs the same within your set of references, it doesn't really matter what they are. I mean, obviously the DOI is kind of useful because it points to that, but the DOI is still going to be in the BibTeX data anyway. So if you just call them, reference 1 through 50 or something, it's, it would still be fine.
We don't have EndNote description in here, or do you have that defined, Jacob? I mean, obviously you have it working, but.
All right.
I'm just saying here the EndNotes. Yeah, let's not define that now. That's not going to be useful.
I have something in there for it now, but I was just coming up with something for the time to support everything that was already being exported.
Okay. All right. I think this is looking pretty good and consistent. What do you guys think? The whole package.
Yeah, I think the end would probably just be an entry in text.
Come again,
An
please.
entry, it'd probably be at entry, a label, comma, and then text equals, and then whatever the content of the end note is. And maybe with an optional citation if you're linking it to a reference.
New page. That's.
All of this is reminding me why you don't write a complicated document in Word.
Yes. That's why you write it in author. Haha. Right. Okay. Someone dictate, please.
Okay, at entry,
Yeah,
left brace, at entry, left brace, okay. Now label,
so what's the label going to be again? It's going to be the.
just whatever identifier you're using in the text when you're marking
Oh,
the
yeah.
end note.
So what do we do with that, Jacob? We use a superscript number, don't we? Or was it a letter? Something that annoyed Mark Anderson, I remember. Just going to call it A, actually. Okay, and then we have.
I don't
Okay,
recall off the
text
top of my
equals,
head.
Sorry, what's that?
text
I
equals,
don't
Yeah. Text equals, right?
and brace it right. And then comma, then underneath that, cite equals, which is an optional citation if you're gonna have one.
No, it's not. Well, just for now, this is it, right?
Okay, that's good enough for now, yeah.
Are you on a closing brace on the next
And
line?
then a closing brace. Right brace at the end of the next line. That's it, perfect. Good enough. And you might want to comma after the A, but that's again optional.
You know, I finally figured out why I think of Visual Meta, excuse me, not Visual Meta, obviously BibTeX being a complete plane crash. Isn't that what they say when the plane is crashing? Brace, brace, brace. That's what I hear all the time with you guys. Sorry, worst dad joke ever, but I am a dad, so I'm allowed to say it.
Actually, yeah, well, if
Add a comma after the A. And the
A,
answer
yeah, would have.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll do that.
consistency.
I mean, I don't. You probably haven't time to do it, but one thing you could consider with this layout actually is in a sense of having the sort of the human written version, and then the text, the actual example, which allows you, which basically gets you out of this thing of explaining what on earth these stupid IDs are. You just say ID, and then they'll see, oh right, it's just any old thing. But that's all more work at this late stage.
Do we want a comma there? Is that what you're saying?
After A.
After A. That's it.
Okay,
Perfect.
good. All right. Okay, we've gone way over, and I'm very, very grateful, guys. I'm really super grateful.
Yeah, the only other verbose possibility would be to just put in a purpose field on each of the entries where you have purpose equals, and then this record is used to hold whatever, and just actually put the explanation embedded in the file. But that would make the text a lot bigger and more verbose again. But if you wanted it to be more on the self-documenting side, you could even have maybe like a verbose output version. If you generated your visual meta with a -v flag on it, it could add a bunch of purpose fields to all of the records to tell you what the purpose of the record is and explain any other fields.
Yeah, that sounds like the kind of thing to suggest next time around the boy. I think that's quite a nice idea.
Just going through this consistent formatting thing here. Yeah, I think we're good. We'll see how it goes, and after feedback from tomorrow, I will present that to you guys on Friday, of course, and then we'll see if we can just implement.
Sounds good. And thanks so much for putting in that hook for the content hashes, because I could see them not wanting to add it afterwards if they didn't know about it up front.
Yeah, no, it's worthwhile to think about that aspect. I have a question here, Jacob. You've implemented the full document text, putting it into it. What are you doing to deal with line breaks and stuff like that? I've just written something here. I don't know if that's correct what I'm saying.
I haven't done anything special at all. There's no columns, no. To be safe, we'll literally have to put some kind of special token in for line breaks, because I'm getting new lines everywhere inserted, and it's the same problem we have with glossary text. Just why we're only displaying it as it is in the document, because every time I try to, I can't figure out, is this the end of a sentence and a purposely added new line, or is this just the PDF system only giving me what is rendered?
Yeah, no, well, okay. I mean, the problem was that, as you explained, but the positive thing is this is the reason why we're doing this.
Unless the text is, again, stored as just like actual metadata on the file and as raw plain text.
Right, so you're getting new lines where the line break algorithm is adding them, is that it?
Well, essentially. So let me.
Oh, are you getting a bunch of hyphens added in too?
Can I send images in chat? So take Yeah, I can. Um, okay, did that screenshot come through?
Yeah, let me just see. We have to download it.
Got it.
So when I go to say from author carries list all the way down to edit or delete them, if that's an entry in Visual Meta, for example, if that were, I can only get it by line. So I would get author carries list, and I would just get a line going to multi-dash. And at that point, I had to figure out, okay, is there supposed to be a space here? Is there supposed to be an actual new line here? Is there supposed to be a page break? I have no clue. And so all the places, like when Reader shows glossary entries on find, that's why it's formatted the way it is and not nicely flowing text.
Yeah.
And come think of it, this could really screw up the hashes too. We can strip the white space from all the other stuff, but if the white space in the content is mangled by this, it'll be problems.
Yeah, so let's not worry about that now. That is literally going into the guts of
Well, I guess if we specify that the visual meta has to be starting on a clean page and not run in with existing text, maybe we could then export from the PDF the page where the visual meta starts and every page is after, and then hash on that exported page or pages of the PDF that were stripped off and separated for the visual meta. Although really you won't be hashing on the text of the visual meta before you have a PDF generated from it. That's the only sane thing to do. Trying to hash on a visually generated typeset version of something is going to drive you nuts.
Well, the way that could be done, so say for the table of contents, I have to generate the document. I have to lay it out and I save it to a PDF in a temporary folder. I open it up, I figure out where all the crap is, and I generate the table of contents. I figure out how long that is, how many pages that's going to add. I do the same thing again. I put in the text for the page numbers, and I generate another damn table of contents PDF. Stitch it all together. It can be done if that's how I need to do it. But with the hashes would have to be maybe on a completely separate page, just to not shift everything around.
I think we should not talk about that too much today because, don't forget, Adobe did introduce Liquid View to deal with this kind of stuff. So they accept that it's a complete mess. So let's leave that as experimental. And I thank you all exceptionally much for today. Tomorrow, Peter and Mark will at least be available. Sure. Probably, Mark, you will be in the conversation and Jacob will be able to do texting, right? And we'll see all of you on Friday.
Yeah, and I'll have my email window open for any messages that come through.
That's fantastic.
And don't worry too much. I sent Fred and I copied to Jacob and Peter some stuff about bibliothèque layout in terms of references, but don't worry about it unduly at this point. It's not something to worry about for tomorrow's meeting.
Okay, good luck, Fred.
Jacob,
you're well prepared. You'll be able to handle anything they throw at you.
Hope so. With your
I have every
support.
confidence in you.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for everything. See you on Friday.
Bye-bye, Fred.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.